On this Tuesday night, Canada determined this man was a member of a terrorist organization. So why did a Liberal MP, who is now a cabinet minister, recommend he be allowed into Canada? Global News investigates. Growing tariff turmoil.
This is clear extortion from the United States.
What Canada's Prime Minister now says about the likelihood of a tariff-free trade deal with the U.S. Fast and furious flooding, the torrential rains drenching the northeastern U.S. Plus, a life well run.
He had a glint in his eye. He was determined.
The legacy of the world's oldest marathoner.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with a Global News investigation into something Canada's Public Safety Minister did before he was appointed to a senior role in Prime Minister Mark Carney's government. Court documents reveal Gary Anandasangaree, an MP from the Toronto area, wrote letters in support of an immigration application by a man who officials had already determined was a member of a terrorist organization. The man is Sri Lankan and authorities believed he had ties to the Tamil Tigers, a group that fought a long civil war against the Sri Lankan government. Critics call it a serious lapse in judgment by a man who is now in charge of public safety in Canada. Jeff Semple has our top story tonight.
Gary Anandasangaree was sworn in last spring as Canada's Minister of Public Safety, in charge of the country's national security agencies. But court documents obtained by Global News reveal before he became Public Safety Minister as an MP, Anandasangaree wrote letters of support for a suspected member of a terrorist organization to come to Canada.
We have this egregious error on his part, a lack of judgment at a minimum. He should resign his post immediately.
Anandasangaree wrote these two official letters in 2016 and 2023 to the Canada Border Services Agency on behalf of Senthuran Selvakumaran. The Sri Lankan citizen previously admitted to officials in Canada and the UK that he was a former member of the LTTE, also known as the Tamil Tigers. The militant group fought for decades for an independent Tamil state, assassinating politicians and pioneering the use of suicide bombings, including on civilian targets. Tens of thousands were killed before the group was defeated in 2009. In 2006, the Canadian government designated the LTTE a terrorist organization. Selvakumaran said he was never involved in any violence and merely distributed LTTE propaganda. After his first immigration application was rejected, Selvakumaran then changed his story and claimed he was never a member of the LTTE. His lawyer said Selvakumaran made a mistake well over 2 decades ago and claimed refugee status in the United Kingdom based on a false story of relatively low-level involvement with the LTTE. But Canadian immigration officials concluded he had protracted involvement with the group for 7 years in the 90s, at a time when the LTTE was heavily engaged in the commission of terrorist acts. As a result, his applications to immigrate to Canada were rejected 4 times between 2005 and 2024. In his letters, Anandasangaree urged officials to overturn those rulings. He noted that Selvakumaran married a Canadian in 2005, and they have a young child. Separating the family for such a prolonged period of time is rather cruel and inhumane, Anandasangaree wrote. Anandasangaree also reiterated that Selvakumaran's claims of affiliation to LTTE was erroneously made. He was wrongfully counseled by his legal representative to lie. But immigration officials didn't buy it. Those same border officials who rejected the applications now report to Anandasangaree in his role as Public Safety Minister.
He's undermining national security by calling into question the decisions that they make to try to prevent people who may pose a threat to public safety or national security from coming to Canada. And now he's the minister.
In an emailed statement, Anandasangaree says he denounces terrorism in all its forms and that his office handles hundreds of immigration matters every year. He also noted that his office sent the letter in 2023 before he became a minister. In fact, he received his first cabinet appointment as Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations the very next day. Donna?
All right, Jeff Semple in Toronto, thanks. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson is with me now. Mercedes, it's not unusual for MPs to write letters on behalf of their constituents. In fact, it's part of their job. But help us understand why what happened here appears problematic.
You're right, Donna. It's not uncommon at all for MPs to write letters to help their constituents and families when it comes to immigration matters. And in this case, Selvakumaran's wife was a constituent of Gary Anandasangaree's at the time. But this was not your run-of-the-mill immigration case, simply asking to bring a spouse or parents or grandparents to Canada. It involved a man who was denied immigration on national security grounds after Canadian authorities determined that he was a member of a terrorist organization. Minister Anandasangaree went to bat for this individual knowing those findings. In fact, in the letter, he asks for them to be overturned. It is not a common occurrence for a member of Parliament to ask the Canada Border Services Agency to overturn decisions that are made on national security grounds. And while Anandasangaree wrote that second letter just before he went into cabinet, he did have an elevated position in caucus at the time as the parliamentary secretary for the Minister of Justice.
And now he is a cabinet minister with a lot of authority. He's in charge of public safety. What kind of response are you getting from the government, Mercedes?
The Prime Minister's office has been silent, Donna. We've asked them for 2 consecutive days about these letters. Was the Prime Minister aware? And whether Mark Carney continues to support his public safety minister. All Global News has been told is no comment for 2 days in a row. So we don't know what Mark Carney's thinking is on this at this time. Anandasangaree has already taken the highly unusual step of recusing himself from decisions or discussion related to 2 Tamil Tiger-affiliated terrorist groups in Canada. He's done that by implementing an ethics screen. But he is now in charge of the Canada Border Services Agency, something that several national security sources described as awkward at best, especially at a time when national security and the border are such sensitive issues with our Five Eyes partners. Donna?
Okay, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. Thank you. Patrick Brown, the mayor of Brampton, Ontario, is under police protection after threats were made against him and his family. Peel Regional Police say they're still investigating the threat. They say it came from within Canada and that it was decided additional security is necessary. Here's what Brown had to say.
This is not the first time I've received a death threat. I did so a number of years ago. I'm sure it won't be the last, and it certainly won't change my approach. I certainly want my family to be safe, and I believe they are, but it won't change my approach to being outspoken about public safety and to do my job accordingly.
Brown has been vocal about cracking down on crimes such as auto theft and gang violence. We got new insight today from Prime Minister Mark Carney about the tricky task of negotiating a new trade deal with the U.S. Last week, the U.S. President Donald Trump amped up the pressure, threatening a 35% levy on Canadian goods as of August 1st, unless a new trade deal is reached. And today, as Mackenzie Gray reports, Carney changed his tough tone, hinting Canada may have to accept some tariffs.
The Prime Minister putting the pressure back on himself.
I expect that the discussions will intensify between now and the end of the month, and we'll be working hard on that.
But in French, the Prime Minister took a less optimistic tone when asked if a deal can be had with Trump without tariffs.
Avec des Américains.
There isn't a lot of evidence that any country has gotten a deal without U.S. tariffs, Carney said. His first admission that Trump tariffs on Canada might be here to stay.
They want to break us so they can own us.
A change in tone from Carney, who'd promised an elbows-up negotiation to end all tariffs, a shifting position that's not sitting well with groups that represent Canadian workers.
Normalization of tariffs will have, I guarantee you, an impact on the Canadian economy. It will have an impact on jobs.
The latest Trump threat? A 35% tariff on all goods not covered by our existing free trade deal. The majority of trade between Canada and the U.S. wouldn't be impacted, but many sectors like pharmaceuticals, softwood lumber, and aluminum would be hit. And if tariffs stay, the steel industry warns they'd be crushed.
The devastation is mounting. We've had thousands of job losses, 30% drop in production.
The new looming tariff deadline, August 1st, dragging out negotiations that Carney had originally hoped to have done by the G7 in June, and then by July 21st. But so far, no deal. Despite compliments.
You're a transformational president.
And concessions, like not retaliating against Trump's 50% steel and aluminum tariff, and giving into core U.S. complaints, like increasing defense and border spending, plus dropping the digital services tax, moves that haven't mattered to Trump.
Rather than paying the tariffs, the country or the company will build in the United States.
Carney also said that the U.S. has applied one of the lowest effective tariff rates on Canada, Donna, a potential future talking point to help justify a deal that includes tariffs, which Carney previously called illegal and unjustified.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray, thank you. Inflation in Canada picked up in the month of June as the cost of certain goods went up. Stats Canada reports the inflation rate increased in June to 1.9% annually, up from 1.7% in May. Inflation rose in the U.S. too, hitting 2.7% in June, up from 2.4% the previous month. Heather Urix-West looks at what's behind those rising costs and what it means for you.
We just bought a new car, and cars are insanely expensive now.
For the Lee family, the impact of Canada's latest inflation rate is all about that sticker shock, with the cost of cars jumping the most. The price of new and used vehicles rose 4.1% year over year in June. Furniture, clothing, and shoes were up as well, with lower fuel prices down more than 13% over last year, cushioning the blow.
You're starting to see tariffs creep into the inflation data. You have the U.S. tariffs, but even the counter tariffs, and that's keeping prices higher than they otherwise would be.
Grocery prices are rising too, though that pace has slowed. Food inflation was up 2.3% in June, down from 3.3% the month before, with the price of vegetables seeing a drop for the first time since 2021.
It seems comparing to last year, maybe things have slowed down a little bit. But it's hard to say.
I think I still have sticker shock at strawberries or water. $17 for a watermelon. Yeah, sticker shock.
Factoring out low oil prices and the impact of Canada's consumer carbon tax ending last April, the country's inflation rate is actually about 3%, likely too high for the Bank of Canada to comfortably cut interest rates later this month.
Their target as the central bank is, of course, to control for inflation. So we don't want to see this buildup in prices that we saw, just a few years ago. We want to make sure that there is not a sustained price pressure. And so we think that they're going to hold.
A U.S. interest rate cut is unlikely as well, with inflation south of the border jumping to nearly 3%. Trump's tariff policy is now impacting prices stateside, leaving Canadians to wonder if rising inflation might be what finally gets the U.S. president to back down. Heather Urix-West, Global News, Calgary.
There was a security incident involving a small plane at Vancouver International Airport today. RCMP say a small private aircraft was hijacked from the Vancouver Island area. And YVR says all other planes were grounded for 39 minutes as the RCMP responded. Officers were seen on the tarmac with guns drawn while the lone occupant of the plane was taken into custody. Flights have since continued to operate normally. New Brunswick has declared its first measles outbreak of the year. Public health officials say there are 3 confirmed cases and 5 probable infections in the province's south central region. There has been an alarming rise in measles cases in other parts of Canada. Alberta has joined Ontario in surpassing the number of confirmed cases in the U.S. And the latest data from Health Canada shows 6 provinces reported new cases at the start of July. Fierce floods and flames coming up. A wildfire raging through a small community in Newfoundland and Labrador, plus the downpour that hammered parts of the U.S. There was havoc on parts of New York City's subway system as a powerful storm dumped record-breaking rain on the northeastern U.S. overnight. More than 50 millimeters fell on Central Park in a single hour. That's the second wettest hour ever recorded in New York. In New Jersey, the weather triggered a state of emergency and is being blamed for at least 2 deaths.
Last night we got crushed, not just here in Berkeley Heights, but in this part of the state in particular. Sadly, 2 losses of life in Plainfield in a vehicle that was swept away, and sadly, the deceased were extracted.
A number of water rescues have taken place across the region. Forecasters warn the sprawling storms could still trigger flooding from Washington, D.C. to the Carolinas tonight and into tomorrow. More than 560 wildfires are burning across Canada now, most of them in Manitoba, and many of them driving people from their homes. The smoke has drifted across the country, triggering air quality concerns in communities thousands of kilometers from the flames. And as Heidi Petracek reports, there are still months to go in what's considered wildfire season.
This wildfire in the small community of Chance Cove in Newfoundland and Labrador surged overnight.
I don't know if it's sunk in yet what we were looking at, just some massive smoke and fire.
Ryan Pitts saw the flames from his house, and by the time he took his boat to see if anyone needed help, cabins were engulfed in flames. No injuries have been reported, but he says dozens of structures are gone.
Every few minutes, you'd hear a propane tank explode. It sounded like a bomb. It was crazy.
It's one of more than 100 wildfires in the country considered out of control.
A lot of areas were quite dry heading into the fire season, combined with heat and wind. All of that is conducive to severe fire behavior.
Tens of thousands of people have already been forced from their homes, and all those fires send smoke in the air, creating stifling conditions in cities like Toronto, where temperatures are high.
It's easier to breathe today. Just drinking a lot of water, staying indoors to stay healthy.
The minuscule pieces of soot wildfire smoke contains are harmful to breathe in.
When you inhale them, they enter deep into your lung, they interact with the cells there, they cause damage, they can cause inflammation.
According to Environment Canada, Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec City remain at high risk, along with Inuvik in Canada's north. Saskatoon was forecast to be worst of all Tuesday. Things are expected to improve there by evening.
Be smart, look at the air outside, and try to schedule your activities around those poor air qualities.
Back in Chance Cove, there's hope a change in the wind will help firefighters.
It was scary, but it was more heartbreaking to me.
Another season of devastating wildfires, hard on Canadians' bodies and souls. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
A coalition under threat ahead. A debate over conscription is pushing Israel's government to the brink. There is some big political turmoil underway in Israel. The future of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government is in doubt because an ultra-Orthodox party says it's pulling out. At issue is a long-standing debate over whether ultra-Orthodox religious students who are exempt from military service can be conscripted. As Mike Armstrong explains, what happens next could trigger the first elections in Israel since the war in Gaza began in 2023.
It is a nation at war, wrestling with the question of who should fight it. This is a protest last month, ultra-Orthodox Jews in Israel ripping up draft notices. It's a debate Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has tried to control, but one that may now bring his ruling coalition to the brink. 6 members of the ultra-Orthodox party, United Torah Judaism, are pulling out of his coalition. That would leave Netanyahu with the slimmest of majorities in the 120-seat Knesset, one single seat. The party's pulling out is being praised by many in the community it represents. This man says the best way to fight the government is from the outside. The UTJ members, he says, never should have joined the coalition. Now, most Israeli men serve 3 years in the military and a year of reserve duty. Women serve 2 years. But the ultra-Orthodox have been exempt since the creation of the country to allow them to study holy texts. The question has become whether that's sustainable. When the exemption started, it only applied to a few hundred people. The ultra-Orthodox are now the fastest growing community and are projected to represent 1/3 of the country within 15 years.
It's clear-cut that you cannot continue like that with such a large minority of the past becoming a governing majority.
Now, there is a growing resentment over the exemption, with many saying the ultra-Orthodox should share the burden of service, especially considering the mobilization against Hamas. While politically, losing the support of the ultra-Orthodox could force Netanyahu to rely on hardline far-right members of his coalition. That could affect ceasefire negotiations with Hamas. Far-right parties oppose concessions and have threatened to quit the government over even a pause in the fighting. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
2 men who cut down England's beloved sycamore gap tree have each been sentenced to 4 years and 3 months in jail. That tree stood for nearly 150 years near Hadrian's Wall before it was cut down with a chainsaw in 2023. That triggered sadness, disbelief, and anger right around the world. Prosecutors called it a moronic mission. The 2 men were convicted of criminal damage for destroying the tree in the middle of the night and harming the ancient wall it fell on. The tree was a popular spot for photographers, hikers, and even marriage proposals. Next, the inspiring story of a man who proved you're never too old to get moving. One of India's most beloved amateur athletes has sadly been killed in a suspected hit and run. And what he accomplished in life is being remembered as deeply inspiring. Fauja Singh resumed running very late in life and in 2011 was said to be the first centenarian to complete a marathon when he finished one in Toronto. He broke a number of age records over the years. Redmond Shannon on the legacy of a man who never let his age slow him down.
There are late starters, and then there's Fauja Singh. Teased for being weak as a child, he spent most of his life on his farm in India. After the deaths of his wife and two of his children in the 1990s, he struggled with depression, so his family in the UK brought him to London.
It was in the parks and streets of London where Fauja Singh discovered a new sense of purpose and joy.
Running, although he turned up for his first club practice in a three-piece suit.
The glint in his eye, he was determined, but most of all, he was a receptive student.
That helped him smash records around the world. At 92, he ran the Toronto Waterfront Marathon in 5 hours 40 minutes. 8 years later, he returned, thought to be the first person over 100 to complete a marathon, although he didn't have the birth certificate needed to get him into the record books.
His simple reply, which was very, very apt, he says, "Who's Guinness?"
Singh carried the Olympic flame in London and used his profile to raise money for charities. When he ran his last race in 2013, just shy of 102, he put his fitness down to eating a simple, balanced diet. On Tuesday, India's Prime Minister called Fauja Singh an exceptional athlete.
We're trying to uphold what his values were, which was to celebrate his achievements rather than mourn his demise.
Next time you find yourself saying, "I'm too old for that," think of Fauja Singh. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Air Canada showcases Saanich, BC, Havelock, Ontario, and Charlottetown, PEI. Please send your pictures of Canadian pride to globalnational@globalnews.ca and hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.